First of all, I would like to thank you all so much for joining us today for using storytelling to shift social norms and prevent female genital mutilation/cutting. I'm Catherine Cox, a program intern with Sahiyo, and I'm so honored to be joined today by Maria Taher from Sahiyo, Amy Hill from Storycenter, and many of the current and former Voices to End FGMC participants. Female genital mutilation/cutting involves the total or partial removal of the external female genitalia for non-medical reasons. Along with being a human rights violation, FGMC is an extreme form of gender-based violence. At our event today, we will introduce the collaborative Voices to End FGMC project, which centers around storytelling by survivors, those affected by FGMC, and advocates working to end FGMC as a tool to challenge the social norms that perpetuate the practice. Using a combination of dialectic presentation, audience participation, and short videos, we will explore the theoretical underpinnings of the Voices Project, highlight the success of our digital storytelling workshops, and share how the project has been used to support women in their healing journey and furthered efforts to prevent future generations of girls from enduring this form of gender-based violence. Today, we're going to start with a quick overview of the work Sahiyo and Storycenter have done, what the Voices to End FGMC project is, as well as introducing the methodology behind the Voices project. Following that, we will have the opportunity to watch some of the Voices videos and hear from our participants themselves about their experience. Next, we will discuss what the future of the Voices project looks like. And finally, our experts will be taking audience questions. If you want to ask a question to our panelists live, please submit your question in the Q&A box and we'll select a few questions to ask live during this time. So first up today, we wanted to introduce Sahiyo and Storycenter and the amazing women who have helped create the Voices to End FGMC project. Today, we're joined by Amy Hill. She is the co-founder of Storycenter's Silence Speaks program and has 20 years of experience in storytelling and participatory media for women's rights. Maria Taher, one of Sahiyo's co-founders, has also graciously joined us today. Maria Taher has worked in the field of gender-based violence prevention for over 10 years, and she is one of the 5 co-founders of Sahiyo and is a strong believer in the power storytelling has to create change. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Maria.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you all for joining our event today. We're really excited to have you here and to be able to talk about the Voices to End FGMC project. Just to give you a little bit of context about Sahiyo, and Kate, actually, could we go to the next slide? Great. So Sahiyo began as a conversation in 2015 between 5 women who felt very strongly about the ritual of female genital cutting in the Bora community specifically, as we all had ties to that community. And the Bora community is a South Asian Muslim group with origins from India. Our group included a social worker, a researcher, 2 filmmakers, and a journalist. And all of us had been speaking out in our own ways against the practice of female genital cutting. And really, as our collaboration grew, we realized the need for an organized, informed forum from within the community that could help drive a movement to bring an end to FGMC. So that is how Sahiyo, the organization, was born. And Sahiyo is dedicated to empowering Asian and other communities to end female genital cutting and create positive social change. We are working towards creating a FGMC-free world, and we really aim to recognize and emphasize the value of consent in a child or woman's right over her own body. And we really work to create a culture in which female sexuality is not feared or suppressed, but embraced as normal. And lastly, for those who don't know, Sahiyo is the Bora Gujarati word for Sahiyo, which I might be pronouncing incorrectly, but it means friends, and it really reflects our organization's mission to engage in dialogue with the community to find a collective solution towards ending the practice of female genital cutting. So now to talk a little bit about the Voices Project. The Voices Project is aimed to mobilize a critical mass of storytellers and activists from across the globe and really works to bring people together to share and heal from experiences of female genital cutting, connect and grow as leaders in their own communities, and create short videos calling for an end to the harmful practice. To give you a little bit of context and history about the Voices Project, as mentioned earlier, Sahiyo is a joint digital storytelling project by Storycenter and Sahiyo. And in 2018, our organization launched an inaugural digital storytelling workshop that brought together FGMC survivors living in the United States to really surface their personal experiences of FGMC. Originally, it was called the Sahiyo Stories, and since then, those videos have been used as educational tools to discuss FGMC amongst a wide variety of audiences. Then in 2019, Sahiyo Stories expanded to what is now known as Voices to End FGMC, and we hosted 3 additional digital storytelling workshops, including a pilot online workshop, to really increase participation from storytellers living globally, and to further our reach and capacity to highlight the stories of women affected by female genital cutting living globally. Now in 2021, we just finished hosting our 5th online workshop, which was done over the course of 6 weeks in January and February. And of course, it was done virtually as we are living in this pandemic age. But since we had done a pilot, we had the tools in place to be able to host this one virtually. And overall, these stories have really helped to elevate the conversation of FGMC in the US and globally, and have been shared widely through online distribution, screening events, and media. And today you're actually going to get a sneak peek of 3 of the videos that were completed from our most recent workshop. So we're really excited to share those videos and have the storytellers themselves on this panel this morning. Just one other thing to really help highlight the diversity of participants and videos created, we created this map to show you all the locations that storytellers are coming from, to really show the impact in terms of how widespread FGMC is, but also how widespread our storytellers are from across the globe, who are either survivors who are impacted by this, or they're advocates working to end on FGMC. So with that, I am going to now turn it over to Amy to discuss a little bit more about the methodology behind the workshops.
Thanks, Maria. I think we can go to the next slide. So just a little bit of background about StoryCenter. We're a nonprofit. We've been around for more than 25 years now. And as people are probably aware, the term digital storytelling is used to refer to kind of a variety of media production practices or different approaches to making media. And for our purposes at StoryCenter, digital storytelling is a hands-on participatory media workshop process that brings small groups of people together over the course of a number of hours and days in a really carefully facilitated workshop environment to to share personal stories from their own life experiences in their own voices, work with facilitators to develop these stories as scripts and audio recordings, and then select and generate images to illustrate their stories. And I'm not going to go into too much more detail about the specifics there. We have other webinars that you can find on our website to learn more about the workshop methods. But let's go to the next slide and talk just about sort of the rationale for our work in women's health and human rights, including the Voices Project. So, first of all, I want to just say that, the Voices, the impetus for it is also born out of a kind of an impulse to democratize cultural and artistic practice. So to kind of displace the act of media production from a more professionalized realm into a truly community-based realm, so that everyday people can share and witness stories. And the reality is that many of the stories that are created in our workshops would not exist without this special kind of environment that we create. So in terms of why personal storytelling can be so powerful for community-based change work and policy advocacy, first, they're related to the work at the individual and community level. Research shows that telling and listening to real people's stories can increase self-esteem and well-being, particularly people's sense of self-efficacy or their belief that they have agency and can handle life's challenges. And then secondly, moving along this little continuum, which is kind of loosely based on the people in public health might be familiar with the social ecological model for change, which ranges change across kind of a continuum of levels of influence. So if we think of the idea of health literacy, which is the degree to which individuals have the capacity to obtain, process, and understand basic health information and access services needed to make appropriate health decisions, storytelling brings across factual information along with more of a human perspective drawing upon emotions. And so in this way, stories can really prompt reflection on the part of listeners, and this allows them to apply what they've drawn from the story to their own life situations and act accordingly. And in our on-the-ground work in communities, we've seen that these ideas really fit with adult education and social issues more broadly beyond just the health issues. And then the third item here around community building is just pointing to the fact that our methods are really owe a debt of gratitude to the popular education work of Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, who believed that the development of critical consciousness, which he saw as a precursor to action for social change, must begin with close examination of one's own experience and its location within an unjust social and political environment. And so in this way, practices like digital storytelling essentially function as a form of political education, because as their journey happens through the workshop, the storytellers are better able to connect dots between their own lives and the larger social, cultural, historical, and political structures in which their lives are unfolding. And as they continue to make these connections, which in this case, they're sort of glaringly obvious with the issue of FGMC, they really are able to bond with each other around a shared sense of purpose and can become further mobilized to speak out for change. And then along those lines, in terms of speaking out, sharing and listening to personal stories have also been shown to really spur people's desire and involvement in change-making activities. And there's various research pieces and evaluations that have been done that document this. And then lastly, in terms of policy advocacy, those of you who've been involved in policy advocacy don't need research to know that storytelling in the form of personal expressions and testimonies can have a really profound influence on legislative decision making. And so the stories are really put to great use in terms of advocating for policy change, as well as supporting efforts to do policy education, both for those affected by policies and those tasked with enforcing policies. So I think we can go on to the next slide. So our workshop unfolds across these four main areas. As Maria mentioned, because of the pandemic, we've had to shift all of our work to a virtual context, but the flow of the workshop remains the same, even though we typically now spread it out over a number of sessions over a number of weeks, rather than doing it as more of a consecutive day kind of experience, which is what we do when we can meet in person. But essentially the workshop process really begins with helping people dive into what it means to share a meaningful first-person story from their own life by looking at some examples and talking about what makes a powerful story. And then we move into script development and audio recording. So people either write down a script and craft it in that way, or we transcribe what they have spoken verbally in a story circle process and work with them to kind of craft a written version of the story. And then we work with them on audio recording. And we don't use video cameras because we know from lots of experience that some people tend to really, actually many people tend to really get nervous when they have a video camera in front of them. So we just do simple audio recordings with voiceover audio. And then we work with our participants to generate and collect and develop visual images for their stories. And then finally, where we can, we do hands-on participatory teaching with a simple cloud-based editing tool called WeVideo, and we teach people how to construct their own stories. And an important piece of the workshop is on the very last session. We screen all of the draft stories and kind of celebrate what people have created, so they get a sense really of closure for that production process and that experience of sharing, as well as a chance to start to think about what it may mean to share their story publicly. And just to say, of course, with that process, you know, all of our work at Story Center is grounded in a really solid approach to ethical practice in terms of what it means to publicly share really sensitive life stories. So we weave discussion over and about what it means to represent oneself and what it means to share certain pieces of information across the entire workshop, so that people can make good decisions and feel comfortable about what they're deciding to reveal and share in their stories. And so all of that is really grounds our work. So I think we can go to the next slide.
Yep, and so next up, you guys are going to get to watch some of our voices videos and hear from our participants themselves about their experience. The way we've done it is we've grouped the videos together, so we'll watch a few videos before hearing from our participants, and I'll stop sharing my screen, and then our participants will get to discuss a little bit about their work and their experience. So first up, we have Arefa Johari's video, A Chorus of Voices. And while you guys are watching, please feel free to share any reflections in the chat.
At the age of 7, a girl named Azamat was taken by her own family members to the home of a strange lady who cut her genitals. They were following an ancient religious tradition, and Azamat was too young to know words like clitoris or consent. She could do nothing. That girl was me. At the age of 11, my name was suddenly changed from Azamat to Arifa, simply because our community's religious leader directed my family to do so. By this time, I was beginning to understand the concept of consent, and I tried hard to protest. But I was still too young to prevail. Once again, I could do nothing. Then, when I was in my 20s, a woman from my community started an online petition urging our religious leader to end the practice of khatna or circumcision on girls. That woman was anonymous, but she had said in public what I had been raging about at home for years. I knew in that moment that I wanted to speak out, openly, publicly, assertively. I wanted my voice to be heard because I was finally old enough to know what clitoris means and what consent means. And I was old enough to actually do something, to convince other families not to harm their daughters in the name of religion. And now I knew that I could prevail. So I started speaking out. I faced anger from some relatives. One of them told me, girls who are not cut turn into prostitutes. I faced discouragement from others. Why speak publicly about the community? They said. Khatna will stop on its own over time. But change does not always just happen on its own. Sometimes it has to be fought for, one dissenting voice at a time, until the chorus is too resounding to ignore.
Thank you so much, Arefa. It's such a beautiful video. And next in the group, we have Severina Lamachokoti's video, Tradition.
I'm a Samburu from northern Kenya, the last-born girl in a polygamous family. When I was 8, I started boarding school with Catholic nuns. My dad was angry with my mom for allowing me to go to school, but she supported me. Just before my 13th birthday, I went back to my village during the Christmas holiday. One morning, my mother woke me up and said, "You have to be strong. It is your day to become a woman and not be dirty anymore. You have to face everything that women face, because I have also faced it." I was led outside our muddy hut, where a smoky fire burned. My clothes were removed, and cold water mixed with milk was poured over me, while my arms and legs were held. I was cut several times with a razor blade. My sister stood next to me, holding a stick, and said, "Don't cry. You will bring shame to our mother." I kept quiet to avoid being beaten. I heard a woman say, "Make sure that it's all cut out." Then I passed out. When I woke up, my whole body hurt. I thought about how I'd been naked in front of all those women, and I did not want to see anyone. Why would our ancestors pass this act down to us? I could not accept it, but others do. Women keep it going, and men never asked about what our girls go through. They only say, "This is what is supposed to happen." When I speak out to educate young girls that they can refuse to be cut, many people say, "Why are you crushing our traditions?" But no one has ever convinced me that the pain of female genital mutilation is justified in the name of culture or anything else. If I ever have a daughter, she will never go through what I went through.
I hope my story will inspire other survivors to step up and help young girls to say no to FGM.
Thank you so much, Severina. And now I will stop sharing my screen and give our participants a chance to speak about their experience.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. And thank you, our friend Severina. It's so wonderful to see your videos again. And so I wanted to invite you both to answer some questions about your experiences. And so for my first question to you, could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you both to join the Voices to End FGMC project? And Severina was actually in our first ever workshop, which we did in Berkeley, California in person. And then Arifa was part of our pilot workshop that we did online. So it'd be great to hear from both of you. Maybe Severina, we could start with you first.
Okay, thank you so much, Maria. And before I answer your question, I just have to say that whenever I listen to that video and see myself just speaking out about myself and what I went through and the hope I have within me about ending FGM in the world and in my community, it gives me goosebumps because it's like it's not true, but there it is, and I really appreciate Sahiyo and Amy for just putting on in all the strength to make sure that this program started with us. And so what inspired me is that I just wanted to let it out. I wanted somebody to listen to me and hear what I've been having in my heart for a long time. Because as a survivor, many survivors who have gone through FGM, you have that particular thing inside your heart that you just want to let it out. You want to ask questions that probably you never even get answers, but you have these questions within yourself that you want to ask, and there is so much that you want to tell the world of what you've gone through. So what really inspired me is that I really wanted somebody to listen to me, and I really wanted to let it out, the baggage that was within me. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And it's so great to see you here and always whenever we connect again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Arifa, I would love to ask you the same question. And also, for those who aren't aware, Arifa is actually one of the co-founders of Sahiyo too.
Yeah, thanks, Maria, and thanks, Sabrina. It's just always chilling to hear your story and to watch your video. I had actually, as Maria said, I have been a co-founder of Sahiyo, and which we formed together in 2015. And I had been speaking out about my experiences before that, since 2011-12. So it's been almost a decade. And when I did this, in the past decade, I have shared my story multiple times. Um, I have, written about it in articles. I have spoken at conferences. Um, I have done media interviews. So it wasn't the first time, and what I wanted to do when I participated at this workshop was, this was an opportunity to do it in video form, which is something that a lot of people connect with. And this was an opportunity for me to talk about, beyond the fact that, I went through FGC and I was subjected to the cut. I wanted to talk about my journey after that, after I started speaking out, and what led me to speak out, and the impact of speaking out on me and on the movement. Um, I find it incredibly, storytelling is incredibly powerful, and breaking the silence is really, um, breaking the silence through sharing one's personal story is probably the most powerful and most important way to actually trigger and nurture a movement. And then I think that's what we found, right? When I shared my story for the first time in India, very few people from our community were doing that. And by speaking out, I was able to connect with others who had, gone through similar experiences, who felt similarly about, similarly outraged about the practice, who wanted to end the practice. And so we were able to connect. A few of us eventually got together and formed Sahiyo, that includes Maria. And then through Sahiyo, we were able to do so much, to be at the forefront of the movement against FGC in India. So, um, and the few of us who spoke out earlier at a time when almost nobody was speaking out, that gradually led to more and more and more women speaking out. And now we just have now it's quite common for people in our community to openly talk about FGC, to admit that they've been through it, and that they are, they oppose the practice and they will not continue it, which was unimaginable a decade ago. So I really wanted to make this video about this story of change that is possible if one chooses to speak out.
Thank you, and definitely agree with you, obviously, on storytelling and the ripple effect it has too. Just to kind of follow up on your question and what you were mentioning, I'd like to ask Severina too, in terms of what she has felt has been the response from people in sharing your story. In Arifa, you kind of talked a little bit about the impact you've seen. So Severina, I'd love to ask you that same question. And just if you could share, what was it like to share this final story, but also just how have people responded and what has that been like for you?
Okay, thank you, Maria. I've shared a couple of to a couple of people because back at home there is a challenge of network, and a lot of my community members don't use YouTube. But then I am looking forward, probably maybe in the near future, I would have that opportunity of just going there with my own laptop and just show them, especially the young girls, so that at least they can be motivated to say no to FGM. Because when I started my work as an activist, I used my own story to tell the pain that young girls go through. And it has really, over the years, it has really helped me out to come out of that box and to answer a lot of questions that, the community ask me, why do you have to do this? You've gone through it. Why don't you let our young girls go through it? You don't want our girls to be, women as you yourself. So that opportunity of just trying to tell them the pain that I went through and other survivors have really encouraged me over the years. And right now, where the few people that have seen my video, they've really gotten encouraged. They have applauded me for the courage that that I had to just come out and start speaking about it and recording the video, because it's not easy. And definitely, on the other hand, from my family circle, not everybody was happy about it, because they kind of felt that, why do you have to expose this? Why do you have like to record yourself and all that? So it's kind of like a 50-50 response from my community and from my inner circle. So as a survivor and as an activist, I just want to say that I grew since I recorded my video. As much as I haven't been on any platform to show my video, but at least I know it's out there. I know somebody will bump into it and watch it and get encouraged and just get something out of it, because it's not an easy task to do it. It's not an easy step to do it, but I know out there somebody must have taken something out of it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I can tell you, your video has been watched and used not only by Sahiyo, but other folks as well. It is for everybody who's aware. The stories are all available on both Sahiyo and Storycenter's YouTube channels, and you can look at them there, but I've definitely know that your and all of the stories are being utilized in various ways too. So thank you. So I'd like to ask just one final question to Arifa. Sabrina actually kind of started talking about it's not easy to do this and some challenges. So Arifa, I'd love to ask you a little bit about challenges in relation to challenges you experienced during the creation or journey of creating your story too.
Yeah, so I definitely want to begin with mentioning that I am privileged to have support from my immediate family. When I first started speaking out, even though my mother did not entirely agree with my perspective, she never stopped me, and she was always supportive of whatever I chose to do and however I chose to speak in public. So I'm really grateful for that. That said, at a personal level, as Sabrina said, you always get mixed responses from community members and relatives and other family members. So it was mixed. Some people, largely there was just indifference when I was trying to initiate conversations in the family and get people to start talking about it, thinking about it. I was just met with a lot of silence and a lot of discouragement. People would just say, why do you want to bring it up? You know, why are you watching dirty linen in public? I mean, all of that. And then there have been a few people who have been very angry with me and who stopped speaking with me, broken off contact. And I come from a community where there is a lot of fear, a very real fear of excommunication and boycott if disagree with the leadership and the administration. And so I've seen that play out with a lot of other people around me who have spoken up. um, who have faced a lot of more intense backlash compared to me. Uh, in that sense, I have been fortunate not to be uh, targeted by the entire community, but uh, definitely, there's been a challenge where, as we formed Sayo, and Maria is familiar with this, um, we've faced a lot of resistance from the community. There is a very active counter movement now where, of women from the community defending the practice in the name of freedom of religion, and claiming it's not harmful. And a lot of times when survivors speak out, they're trolled, their stories are dismissed and not believed. So it's uh, it is difficult to really change people's minds about social norms, but at least having that conversation to begin with is so important, because earlier it was just never spoken about.
Thank you. And yes, it's definitely not easy. So I definitely admire both of you for sharing your stories, and for everyone who we're going to hear from today who's been part of the Voices Project. So thank you again, both, for being part of it and for being here to speak about your stories as well. So I think now we are actually going to go back to Kate so that we can share a few more stories. And I'm really excited to share that these next set of stories are from our latest workshop. So all of you are getting a sneak peek at some of the stories that came out of that workshop. We'll have a larger public distribution later on, but these are 3 stories. And for this last workshop, I should just also explain that we invited advocates to take part on this issue. So the workshop included survivors, community members, and also advocates who've been working on this issue, because we felt it was important to include their voices and stories too about challenges they're experiencing. So Kate, I'll let you start the videos.
Of course, yeah, and thank you so much to our amazing speakers. As Maria was saying, our next little group of videos comes from our most recent pool of Voices participants. And first up, we have Hunter Jesus and her video, Challenging Ideas.
I first learned about female genital cutting in a book I was reading when I was 16. My heart was in my throat as I read through every detail, and I immediately knew I wanted to work to end this practice. While I was in high school, whenever I brought up this topic, people said, "What is FGC? I've never heard of that." So that was the response I came to always expect. Then I got to college. I was a sophomore when FGC was actually mentioned in a class I was taking. The teacher asked, "Does anyone know what FGC is?" One student gave a definition, and other students shared their thoughts too. The problem was that there was a lot of misinformation in what they shared. One said it's a necessary religious practice. Another person claimed it's not that harmful if it's just a prick. And FGC is an African practice, so it should be up to them if it continues. Hearing these students who were just like me defending cutting shocked me. Anger, sadness, and confusion boiled up inside me. I held my friend's hand under the table to keep my emotions inside. But I did have to speak up. My friend and I said that FGC is not a religious requirement, it's a human rights violation, and all forms of it are really damaging. But I got the sense that they didn't really hear us. I learned later that the misinformation these students had shared were things they learned from professors at my school. I was really upset that such trusted sources would pass along this kind of incorrect information. These students weren't monsters who wanted little girls to be cut. It's similar to what happens in communities that continue FGC. When people we trust, our family, our community leaders, our teachers, tell us that something is good or important, we feel like we have to believe them. I learned that day that the movement to end FGC needs to include raising awareness among everybody about the harms of this practice. I also learned that it's important to challenge ideas, even when they come from the people we look up to.
Thank you so much for that amazing video, Hunter. And next up, we have Sumaya Abdurrahman's video, Permanent Wound. Unfortunately, I don't believe Sumaya was able to join us today, but she did give us permission to share her video, and it's quite powerful. So I think we'd like to play it today as well.
أحيانا بتراودني كوابيس إن أنا لسه في مصر. لما هربت كنت بهرب من الألم، من عنف تشويه الأعضاء التناسلية، من عنف الاضطهاد السياسي، وعنف الفضاء العام المعادي. أنا اتولدت في الجزء الشمالي من دلتا النيل. في يوم من الأيام كان عمري 10 سنين، قالولي ممكن أطلب أي حاجة أنا عايزاها. كنت بحب كرتون اسمه الفتيات الخارقات، في العادة ما كانش مسموح لي إن أنا أشوفه، لكن ماما قالت لي أنتي ممكن تشوفيه النهاردة. في بيت صاحبتي شيماء كان في راجل قالولي إنه طبيب، اداني 3 حقن وبعدها قطع جزء من جسمي. ده كان حدث ختان جماعي، كان فيه صراخ كتير. مش فاكرة كتير عن اليوم ده، بس أنا بقيت مشوهة. ده لسه بيسبب لي مشاكل لحد النهاردة. أنا بحب أحس بالعاطفة، مش أي حاجة تانية. القانون في مصر بيحظر ختان الإناث، لكن الدكاترة بيخترعوا أعذار إن هما يعملوا ده، سواء بحاجة الدين أو رغبة في المال. الدايات كمان بيعملوا ده كمصدر للدخل، وهم فخورين. واحدة منهم قالت لي أنا بساعد البنات إنهم يحافظوا على شرفهم، كمان بوفر لهم فرصة أحسن للجواز. من سنين قررت إن أنا أغادر البلد. اتصلت بمهربين بيساعدوا الناس عشان يسافروا للسودان. فضلنا في الطريق لمدة 3 أيام في عربية نقل صغيرة، ومن الخرطوم حجزت رحلة لإسطنبول. وأنا في إسطنبول كنت بدور على بنات زيي. ساعتها نزلت بوست على جروب في تركيا، ردت واحدة أهنتني وقالت لي إن أنا قلت الأدب لأنه أنا عدوة للدين وبتهاجم على الدين. مؤخرا كتبت رسالة لماما، سألتها فاكرة اليوم اللي انتي خليتيني فيه ألبس الفستان اللي أنا بحبه وأكل الأكل اللي أنا بحبه وعدتيني نلعب مع صحابي في اليوم ده، ليه خليتي ده يحصل لي؟ قبل ما أسافر مصر شفت في عينيها إحساس بالذنب بسبب معاناتي والضرر اللي حصل لي، بس أنا مش هقدر أنسى. حتى لو عقلي نسي، جسمي مش هيقدر.
And we thank Somaya so much for being willing to share her powerful story with us today. And last but not least, in our group of new participants, we are joined today by Absa Samba and her video, Please Listen.
When I was in 6th grade, a group of popular girls at my school were saying they wanted to be friends only with those who are pure and clean, meaning only those girls who had been cut. That was the very first time I had my peers discussing the topic. I wasn't sure whether or not I had been through the procedure. So I went home that day and I asked my mom, "Funtata nya katole?" I was so excited when my mom answered yes. At school the next day, I joined the popular group in shaming the girls who hadn't been cut. Solima, we called them. Then in middle school, I joined a club that taught us how harmful FGM is to the girls who were cut and to society. I felt ashamed and guilty for all the girls I had shamed for not being cut. I wondered how many of them had gone home and asked their families to subject them to FGM. I was also angry at my community for continuing to subject girls and women to something so unnecessary and painful. So I started having conversations with my family about the harmful effects of the practice. And when I didn't succeed at home, I talked about it on the radio and made them listen. Over the years, I have engaged in education and advocacy work, traveling across communities in the Gambia, hosting radio talk shows, presenting in various classrooms in the US, and even testifying before a Vermont Senate committee on a bill criminalizing FGM. And yet, as my activism grows, one thing continues to trouble me. How do I convince the world to end such a horrible practice when I still cannot convince some of my own family members?
Thank you all so much, and thank you, Absa, for such an amazing story.
All right, so I would like to invite Hunter and Absa to join us now to answer a few questions about your experiences. And thank you again both for being part of our most recent workshop and our online workshop. And it was really just an honor to have you both take part. So to begin with, I would really love to ask both of you what it was like participating in the Voices Project through an online virtual format as well. Maybe, let's see, Hunter, would you like to go first?
Sure. I really loved participating in the Voices Project online. For me, the virtual format was great because I just got to participate from the comfort of my bedroom. I was actually transitioning back to school in the middle of the workshop, so I did it half in Florida, half in Massachusetts. So the virtual format was what let me participate, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think the best part was that people from all over the world were able to come together, and that made the experience even more special.
Thank you, Hunter. Absa, I would love to ask you the same question.
Thank you, Maria. I think similar to Hunter, the flexibility was amazing. It allowed me not only participate in it, the timing of it, I had conflicts because of work schedules, but because it was online, I could rewatch the videos later and have a session with Amy and you outside of that timing and talk about the project, and also to do it within the comforts of my home in a space that I'm familiar with and I'm confident in. At the same time, I felt there was an aspect of just being in person with people and having that human touch missing as well. But it was a great opportunity nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, Amy and me have facilitated these in person and online, and there's a give and take in terms of being able to have that flexibility when it's virtual, and also being able to address that not everyone can travel. And this is an exception of the world we're living in right now. But there is something to say about also how powerful it can be to be in person. So it's a give and take, but I'm definitely glad you both were able to take part in this last Voices workshop. So for my next question, I would love to ask you both, your videos have not been released yet publicly, but they will. So how do you both plan on using your videos in the future when they're released? And Absa, maybe we can start with you first.
Sure. I guess I'd like to share what made me come up with this story in the way that I did in the first place, which is I have, like I said in the video, spoken in different platforms about my experience with undergoing FGC, FGM, and what that was like and why we should end the practice. And I think that participating in this project allowed me to reflect on that journey and experience. And that was an aspect that I have not shared before, which is what it is like to actually talk to your own family members, some of whom believe in this practice, and what that experience and journey is like. And how do you reconcile that with the work you do outside in the community and in the world? And that was the story I wanted to tell. And it was hard to do that. And it is still hard. I mean, I watched the video, I'm like, man, what was I thinking? But I'm glad that I did, because it is my truth. And I know that I don't take responsibility for the positions that other people choose to take. But I hope that they can come to realize why I take the one that I took, and why it is important that they see how harmful this practice is. So I will be sharing it with my family again. And I mean, anybody who's willing to watch and listen, for sure. I'm pretty open. I have come to terms with this reality, and I've talked about it. So I'm pretty open to who gets to see it.
Thank you. And I know your story is going to be definitely, you know, the way you addressed it at the end about that question about like, how can I talk to my family about this? It's something that so many advocates who are also survivors definitely ask themselves. I know I've asked that myself too, but it's an element, it's in a video. We haven't actually had that story been told in that way in the collection before. And I think that it's I'm very privileged that you wanted to share that and talk about that challenge too. So Hunter, I'd like to ask you the same question about how do you plan to use the video in the future?
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely see these videos as a tool for awareness. I want to spread it as much as possible. But to me, it's also a catalyst to keep speaking out about the importance of FGC in education. Participating in this workshop really helped me find my voice and my confidence in talking about this issue. As of right now, I haven't actually approached the professors at my school who are spreading these really harmful myths, because I've just been worried that they won't want to listen to what I have to say. But participating in the workshop has really made me feel a lot more ready to take that step. And another thing was that participating in this workshop actually has already led to a great opportunity where I was interviewed for a podcast, and I shared the same story, and I talked about how policy can help us improve FGC awareness through US classroom education. So I'm definitely hoping this video will lead to more opportunities like that to keep talking about the importance of FGC and education.
Thank you, Hunter. And I was really glad that Hunter was part of our last workshop, because I was aware of Hunter's experience and she had connected with Sahiyo around that. And it's something that unfortunately is not unique. I've heard that from other folks talking about what's being taught or how this issue is being taught in various classrooms, particularly in universities. And so it felt like it was an important story to address and, you know, be part of that Voices collection. So I have one more question for both of you. And I would love to understand a little bit more, maybe if you're willing to talk a little bit more about the value of personal storytelling for especially new advocates who might just be beginning their journeys and are looking to share their experiences with FGMC. What can you tell them? And either person can go first.
I can start. One thing about participating in the workshop is the network of support that you built. I would definitely recommend it to other advocates, because it's really helpful to know that you're not alone in this work and you have really so many supportive people out there with you. And the importance of storytelling, I think, is one, if you're able to form a personal connection with the work that you're doing, I think it's really helpful to keep motivating yourself to keep working to end FGC and increase awareness about it. And like I said, it definitely helped me grow my confidence in talking about this subject. And it was a great experience for any advocate, I think.
Thank you.
I will agree with that. I think that this workshop really was a great opportunity to connect with people who have a shared understanding of your experience, my experience, and my position on the issue as well. And it's a great way to begin if you're starting to tell your story, because you're gonna be among people who would be a support, but you also will have the opportunity to go through healing together if that's something you are in pursuit of through this process as well. And to just connect with people, individuals who have a shared struggle or experience, and just believe in the value of speaking up and sharing stories and making change in our communities. I think that Amy talked about this in the beginning, but I also do believe that stories have the potential to change the world and to change the way we practice what we practice, how we see the world and how we engage with it. I have prior experience working with organizations to do community awareness and education. And one of the things that we've done greatly was using personal stories. I think that we could bring a lot of data to people and talk about the issue and how it harms us and how it harms our communities. But there is a difference when someone comes forward and said, I have been through this process and this is what it had done to me as a person and as a human being, as a member of your community as well. And I think that stays with people and it reminds them of why they should take time to reflect on it and to consider those stories and those people behind the stories as well.
Completely agree with you. And I can just say, so I do work in a few different states, Massachusetts and Connecticut, around trying to create some comprehensive legislation that's around FGMC and protecting girls from it. And one of the things that we've been using are these stories to help really paint the picture of the impact. And it does it in a way that data just won't do. And I've heard from legislators too, in terms of really like the impact of having these stories. And in Massachusetts, it was really one of the things that helped pass the law after 7 years of trying to pass that law. So definitely. Well, I want to thank you both again for taking time to be part of this event, being part of our Voices project and allowing us to share your stories. We're really excited to be able to, preview them here and to see them go out into the world shortly too. So I will thank you again and then turn it back to Kate.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you both so much. Your stories are so empowering and it was so great to get to hear from you. And so next up, we have our last 3 videos for today. We're gonna start out the next round with the video Still Alive by Sunshine Bayor.
The first time I spoke about it was when I was 38 years old. It was November 2015. I was watching TV at my friend's house. She's a white American, and I met her at church. On the show, a survivor of female genital mutilation was giving her testimony. She described her pain, and I thought what happened to me was more painful and more difficult. I turned to my friend and told her the same had happened to me. She asked, "Do you want to talk about your experience?" I started to shake and I said no. I wasn't ready. A few months later, at school, they asked us to talk about our countries, our culture. I decided to tell my story. I did a 5-point lecture: how, why, when, who, and what. When I got home, I felt proud of myself, and I called my mom back home in Chad. She said, I'm happy you want to talk about it. Even though she's a nurse assistant, she doesn't bring it up with her patients because it is a sensitive subject. Next, I wrote it down, the detail of the practice. The pain was so fresh. It opened a wound that I thought was healed, but it wasn't. It just covered with age. I was caught at age 11. I hemorrhaged and I almost died. Many girls do lose their lives, but I was lucky. My mom rescued me. 15 years later, when my daughter was born, I bled too much a second time, and I almost lost my life again. Now I'm afraid to get pregnant. What if the bleeding won't stop again? Also, because my labia were removed, I get vaginal infections too easily. I don't like having to take antibiotics all the time. In 2016, my book was published. When my son read it, he called me and asked, "Who did that to you? Why?" Then he said, "I'm sorry. I will make sure no one does that to my little sisters." My tears just came out. In Chad, it's forbidden to cry or to talk about it. They say if you do, you will die. They do so many things to keep us silent. But I'm here. I'm still alive.
Elles veulent l'éducation et non la mutilation. Elles veulent la culture et non la coupure. Ndobaya, non. Mutilation, non. Éduquer, oui. Couper, non. Danser pour l'éducation, oui. Mutiler pour...
Thank you so much for that powerful story. And next up, we have a video. Next up, we have a video by Zara Patwa, and her video is by the title of Loyalty.
I'm a proud Dawoodi Bora, and I'm against female Khatna in my community. Some people think that I can't be both. The local Amil sent me a message, through a mutual contact, saying that the work I do to end female Khatna is good, and that I should not talk about it publicly. I tried to arrange a meeting with him, but he kept delaying it and delaying it. Then Sayyidna announced that female Khatna is required and must be done in secret, and the Amil and his contacts stopped talking about it with me. But I kept talking, and people on social media hit back. How can you be a real Bora? You don't wear Rida. You don't attend masjid regularly. You don't follow what Sayyidna says without question. But if I question one practice, does that mean I am not a member of the community? Am I not a real Bora? Am I exposing the community's secrets? But wait, whose secret is it? The girls or the community's? Our community is known for being progressive. People say Bora women are educated, not like in other groups. They're encouraged to have careers, to lead. This is our reputation, and yet we are still cut. I've heard our people defend Khatna. It makes Bora women focused. It's what helps them be serious about their careers. Without it, you'd see more Bora couples divorcing. It keeps our women healthy. I'm a proud Dawoodi Bora. I love my community and always have. I had my misak, I married a Bora, we raise our kids Bora. I think if you love your community, then you help it grow. And if I had a daughter, I would not have her cut. I hope my story will make people realize that you can love a community and want to help it without destroying it.
Thank you so much, Zara, and we're so happy to have you here with us today. And last but certainly not least, we have A Sunny Day in Seattle by Mariam Saifi.
It was a lazy, sunny day in Seattle. I was visiting my niece. She was 7 years old, the same age I was when I was cut. I remembered the emerald green carpet, the jumbo-sized Toblerone my aunt gave me as a bribe. She led me to her basement clinic in India. It was just the two of us, and without warning, she laid me on my back, she spread my legs apart, and I blacked out. When it was over, I sat in a corner with the candy bar, feeling sick to my stomach. I saw my aunt sitting with my cousin laughing and pointing at me. When I confronted my parents years later, they were furious. I learned she did this without their consent. Watching my niece reminded me of the me before I was cut. So confident, so self-assured. In that moment, I felt a wave of emotions. Gratitude she would never experience what I went through, and motivation to act. My father told me, the only way to spark change is to speak up. I worried all of my other identities would be erased. Painter, binge traveler, US diplomat, and proud Texan. When people Google searched my name, would this squeamish acronym be the only thing that would pop up? I eventually allowed my story to be published in The Guardian. It sparked a conversation within my community and even within my own family. My brother was with me that summer, and earlier this year, he launched a campaign to push legislators in Washington state to ban FGM. He wasn't able to protect me from my aunt, but his voice has the potential to break future cycles of violence.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mariam, and speaking in your own personal capacity.
Great, thank you, Kate, and thank you to Bayer, Zara, and to Mariam for being part of the Voices Project. I would love to invite all three of you to speak now. I do know Mariam had a bit of a conflict, so she might not be able to respond, but really glad that you're part of the project and you're here. But Zara and Bayer, are you both there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. And Bayer, I think you're there, but you're on mute. So if you're able to, oh, there you go. Perfect. I see you now. Wonderful.
I completely forgot. I'm sorry that I was the one that should put it on the camera.
That's okay. Glad to have you here.
I'm sorry.
So thank you both for being here and taking part. So Zara took part in our very first Voices workshop when it was called Sahiyo Stories, and Bayer took part in our workshop in DC in 2019, I believe.
Yes.
So, you know, your stories have been out there for a little while too, but I wanted to start with asking you both a question. How did the Voices Project really impact your advocacy, or has it impacted your advocacy, or have you used your video in any way? Zara, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, all right, thank you for having me. This is a really huge piece of my life. Having been through the Story Center and Sahiyo workshop in 2018, it really has changed how I do advocacy. I had started speaking out about Khatna and FGMC in the Dawoodi Bohra community, which is the community I belong to, since 2015. But doing the video and creating that message that could not be distorted was very, very important in terms of my advocacy. So much of my work revolves around within the community. So, bringing those community aspects in was very important to me to share that. And most of what I had, people had been telling me was that, they're afraid to speak out. They're afraid because of the community, because of what people might think. And by doing the video, people realized that they weren't criticizing the community. They were just critiquing this one practice. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You don't have to demolish the whole system. You just need to speak out about the practices that are harmful. And so, we were able to really get a lot of people with our organization. We speak out, get a lot of people to speak out, because it was the fear of bringing down the whole community was not as strong once they realized that, just critiquing one practice is not going to, raise everything. So that's been very, very important. And then in terms of educating other people, there's been, we've used, as Maria said, we're working for an anti-FGMC law in Connecticut, and I am a Connecticut resident. So I'm working along with this phenomenal task force, and we're using these videos as really good education and informational tools for people who have never even realized that FGMC is an issue in Connecticut, let alone in this country. It's always considered this kind of far off African thing, but as Maria had pointed out in one of our presentations, that there are nearly 100 countries around the world. I mean, where FGMC is practiced, and it's on all continents except Antarctica. So, this is a major problem. It may affect a number of people, but it's really a global problem that needs to be dealt with. So by having all of these videos from different communities, it highlights the fact that this is not just this one small issue that one community has to deal with. So in that sense, it's been very, very strong in terms of advocacy. And we've used a lot of other videos to really highlight how diverse the issue is.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. Bear, I would love to ask you the same question.
Yeah, thank you for the video, because I can add something, I still alive and I'm using now my voice to end FGM. So probably our next video will be that one, to add something new, to say that we are moving forward in our journey to end that practice, because after that video, I felt so good in my spirit, I did something, because the training was not only a training, but I call it a space where everyone was there and able to share our experience physically and in a kind of family environment. So I would like to thank you for what you did, that workshop, and the project of putting women together to help them to use their voice and to feel comfortable and to support one another in because it's not easy for some people to speak like me. I learned to speak here in the United States, especially talking about FGM, because in Chad I was working on many other projects where I was able to speak, but never about FGM. So that was my first video. And after that video, I did others that I sent to Chad this year to help people in south of Chad, where we lost 2 girls last summer. And one of my daughters, my stepdaughter, I have 100 girls that they call me mama. So one of them called me and said, now if people say they don't know what is FGM, they are lying, because you explain it clearly. How I did that is because I received that training to be able to go down to write your script, and then go through the process of writing, preparing yourself, and do the video. So the training is really good. And one day my hope is that we will bring that to Africa and be able to go from country to another. I will be happy to help you to go to Chad then we can train, because I call it training people to train more other and to help other women to raise their voice and to speak. So that video was really useful and is still, I will continue to use it. Thank you.
I haven't been able to talk to you in a little while, so that's amazing to hear that it had, such a huge impact. And I'm so glad to hear that you created other videos too. And it would be amazing. Amy and I want to expand this project so much to so many other countries as well. So hopefully one day.
Yeah, because usually when something comes from out with many other, like diversity is important to bring people to feel comfortable, and then to feel like they have the space, they can join the group. That is the beauty of diversity, and join a union. Exactly, diversity and union.
Yeah, completely. Thank you. So both of you spoke about how your videos have been used to educate folks on the issue. And I would like to, I don't know if Mariam is available, but if you are, I wanted to ask if you might have any additional thoughts on that. If not, maybe Mariam can join us. We'll have a general Q&A, and maybe Mariam can share some thoughts then too. Mariam might not be there yet, but Zara and Bayar, is there anything else you would like to mention around how you've seen these videos being used?
Yeah, I sent the video also to a community in Chad, the south of Chad, for boys. I discovered this year that we have a very good team in Chad. They have been working like with I need to do a fundraising or something like this to go and send to them to support them. They are all boys, and they are fighting against FGM in one of the regions that they call themselves the owner of the FGM. Like they are proclaiming themselves to be the promoter of the practice. So that group of young boys, all of them, my other sister that is my backup in Chad that is helping me, she's the one that went and she met them, and then we together organized a conference debate this year in Chad in February 6th. And it was the first time for them to receive help from outside, like from international. And it was very good. And I was happy to see that the boys they're standing now and try to protect their sisters. So that is not right, they're doing, and they rescue a lot of girls. And I'm grateful for that. So we will need to coordinate something and try to see how we can do something with them this year, or probably in May, to train them so they can continue to train others. So that is what I want to add. And
that's amazing to hear. And I think it's so important to have male engagement in this work too. That makes me think of, so Sahiyo just recently launched a male ally program called Bayo, which means brother. And it's something we're recognizing very much. And I think is needed in this work that we're doing, is to really make it a community issue. It means we have to have all genders involved to work on this issue. So thank you for that. And I love hearing all your.
One more thing, I was happy to see that we had a video from the Egypt, she did it in English, in Arabic, I'm sorry. So I asked them to not be afraid of English, because English is a problem, and that region people don't speak even French. So I asked them to make videos for girls that are willing to speak in the native language, because all the South, I speak like 7 other languages from that part of the country. So I asked them to do the video in our native language, and then I can translate, and we can continue to translate it in English. But that aspect will need a lot of work and collaboration. So when they will do the video, I will come back to you to see how we can work together to translate the video and make it available from the grassroots advocacy.
Please do. And I know maybe Amy will want to talk about this later on, but yeah, I see she made a comment in the chat box. But yes, it's so important to have stories in languages other than English. And that's something at Voices we're really trying to do. And we work with storytellers if they're comfortable and if they're willing to share a story in their native language. We think that's really important as well. So yes, do reach out to us.
I just want to just kind of extend your point earlier, Maria. You said about allies, men being one of them, and also women who are not survivors, but come from communities where FGMC is practiced. We found that there are so many people who have not personally undergone this practice, but are such strong supporters and strong advocates for ending this practice. So, it's really important to recognize that they are as important as the survivors too. And they're very sensitive generally to what the survivors have been through. So, not claiming their stories, but really, supporting those who have gone through it. So I really appreciate everyone in the community for that.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. And I see that Mariam, I think, is back on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had to jump on a call. I was like multitasking on Zoom. So
no worries. I'm glad to have you here. So we'll have a chance for a general audience kind of Q&A a little bit later. And so if anybody has specific questions for Mariam, please feel free to ask them too. But I do want to just ask one more question of this group. And Mariam, I'm going to ask you if you'd be willing to talk first. But we talked a little bit about how the Voices Project has been used, how it's used to educate folks. And my next question really is like, why do you feel that survivor-centered advocacy is important, and what does that mean to you? And I know, Zara, you just talked about the importance of allyship, which I agree completely is very important. And that's part of why Voices does include allies in our project. But Mariam, I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about what survivor-centered advocacy means to you and the importance of it.
Thank you. And thanks to Maria, Sahiyo, StoryCenter and sort of all the folks involved in producing this event. I think it's important in general. I think there's a huge power in storytelling, and especially centering the voices of survivors and the broader community, because many people are affected, right? The whole ecosystem. For me, I think it's important to recognize that survivors are more than just their stories, right? They're stories of trauma, singular trauma, that there's, you tend to get boxed in. So like, even though in my piece I talked about, I'm more than this one sort of moment in time when I was 7 years old, like I have done all of these other things, but I think once you become a survivor, sort of advocate, storyteller, you tend to sort of be subsumed into this one box. And so I think it's important, and I think in particular, for people of color, for women of color in particular, FGM is often racialized. It's happening, it's this exotic thing happening faraway places. It's a cultural rite of passage. The way we talk, the language we use to talk about FGM is exoticized, right? And it's not, we don't talk about rape the same way, right? We say, oh, that's a human rights violation, that's wrong. And even in terms of just, I'm kind of processing in the almost year now, it's been since I produced that story, what it means to protect the storyteller, right? When you're unearthing the story, it's traumatic, it's triggering. I don't always, I put mute on my video screen just when I heard my story, because it hurts. It's not, and so there is something to be said for, it is incredible in terms of it raises awareness, but there's also a cost, I think, that we don't always talk about. The storytelling can be an act of catharsis and liberation for many, but it's also for many as well, re-triggering, re-traumatizing. And so I think as we're creating these spaces for connecting with one another around storytelling, we need to also ensure that mental health, that they're trauma informed, so that especially when it comes to women of color, I think, because we're dealing with intersectional traumas that are beyond FGM, just given, we had a reckoning on race over the summer. So a lot of these issues are coming to the forefront. And so I think it's important, and I'm grateful that Sahiyo has created these spaces for storytelling and integrated, some of these practices around prioritizing mental health. I think it's critical. A lot of funders, it's like the side thing, like, oh, let's just produce a story, and then the story becomes the commodity and the storyteller becomes collateral damage. And I think it's critically important that we make sure the storyteller is just as protected, because it's not just, the process is as important as the product.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mariam, for sharing that. And that is something that I see that Amy made a comment in the chat box as well, that is just something that we definitely keep in mind, and we are continually working to improve our workshop and partnering with mental health professionals too, so that we can have them available when if and when storytellers need that type of support too. But it's something that I completely agree. I think it's something that shouldn't be considered a byproduct, and it's something that we're constantly sort of thinking about, how can we incorporate that when we're looking for workshop and getting funding to support that aspect too, when we're expanding this project. So thanks.
Yeah, so this is also a call to funders to prioritize. Grassroots groups like Sahiyo are doing it largely on a shoestring. Like there's a lot of crowdfunding that happens. And so it's hard that requires resources. So for funders that are on the call, I think it should be a line item in all work, whether it's on FGM, child marriage, domestic violence, which has become a shadow pandemic. I think, with this pandemic, mental health should be sort of the top line agenda, and not a nice to have, but a must have.
Definitely, I agree. All right, well, thank you all three. I don't know if Zara or Bear, you want to add anything really quickly, but I think we wanted to try to move on because we do want to have plenty of time for audience general question too.
Not.
Okay, great. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Kate, I think.
Yep, and I will start sharing my screen again. And so I think for the next section, we just wanted to kind of look at what is the future of the Voices Project.
Yes, so I'm going to just talk really briefly. We mentioned that we just completed a Voices workshop, so we'll be releasing 10 new videos hopefully soon. We're really excited about doing that. We also are going to continue hosting additional online and in-person digital storytelling workshops. We do want to expand the project, but again, it does depend on funding, but me and Amy are very committed to continuing this project. So we're hopeful that we can host additional workshops. If any of you are interested in helping us host a workshop, please feel free to reach out to us too. Another thing that we are looking to do is create a Voices 10 FGMC website where we can feature all the stories, also create some curricular resources to support folks who want to use the video in community education and outreach, and to provide training activities. That's been something that we've heard from the storytellers themselves that would be very helpful. And we've heard from others who are using the videos. So that is something that's on our kind of wish list, and we would love to be able to create those resources so that this project is more accessible and the videos are more accessible and people can do more screenings. And then we're continuing to distribute these stories across multiple platforms via social media, via media, really to just build this movement for the survivor-centered, build a survivor-centered movement and build the idea of creating a critical mass of voices so that we can create social norm change. So that's just briefly on what our hopes are and what we're planning to do for the future of this project.
Thank you so much. And like we were saying, now I will stop sharing again. And we can move on to kind of an audience Q&A. I believe Amy has been helping us go through some of the audience questions, and we'll have the chance to ask those questions and answer them live right now.
Okay, so Amy, thank you for combing through the questions. So I think our first question is, I'm going to read it as a comment as well, but thank you to both for sharing your stories. Breaking social norms is so difficult. I'm also wondering, before you were even ready to speak out, if you can remember when you realized that you didn't agree with the cultural norm. What was the process of reflecting on that practice like? So that's one question. I'll ask another question too. Besides witnessing and supporting and trying to educate others, how can a US woman be an ally in this effort? So let's ask both those questions to everybody who is on the call and one of our wonderful storytellers. I'm going to invite all of you to respond to this question. So feel free to respond to one or the other question. I can also read the question over again and clarify if needed. And would anyone like to go first?
I'll take the question about when you realized this was happening in your community. I have no recollection of being cut at the age of 7, but I have confirmation that it was done. And I learned about it when I was 42. So that came as quite a shock to the system because, you know, as Mariam said, you're this whole person with all of these roles in life. You know, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, a professional. You know, there are all these aspects of my life that, you know, are very, you know, I grew up in England, I'm a normal person. And then you find out that something like this has happened to you and you start to question everything. You question everything about your parents, your family, your community. And what happened when I found out was that I reached out to tons and tons of women in my family and extended family, and they all knew about it. And that was a real shock to the system because I had no idea. I was completely clueless. So I think for me, that kind of jolt to reality. And so many people said to me, like, yeah, of course, it's been happening for generations, no big deal. And it just felt like the biggest deal to me. And I think when you realize that, and so many people too, as someone mentioned earlier, that, you know, this physical, traumatic, emotional thing happens to you, and sometimes you just cannot talk about it for years and years. It's so embedded in your body and in your mind that you can't even, you know, accept that it happened. I think that, you know, when you do realize it really makes things, it gives you kind of this new power, because you have power over your own story all of a sudden, as opposed to somebody else telling you what your life is. So I think for me, that was a real jolt of reality.
Thank you. I see Severina's hand is up as well, so I'll let you go, Severina.
Okay, and thank you so much. To answer the same question that Zara has just spoken about, back in my community and most of the African communities, you grow up, a girl grows up in an environment whereby you are being told that you will get the cut. And they make it, they make sure that you are aware of it in a very positive way. And they tell you that you will be a woman, you'll not be married before going through the cut. They will tell you that your breasts will grow well. You know, they just tell you the positive things. And so you grow up as a young girl knowing that FGM exists, but they really don't tell you the effect of it. They don't tell you how traumatizing it is. They don't tell you exactly where they're gonna cut you. They don't tell you exactly how you're going to feel about the situation and how it is going to be done. So they just like give you this beautiful ball for you to hold on it until that day when they just tell you you wake up because it's your time. So that is when you really realize that, oh, so this thing is painful. Oh, so this thing will affect my entire life. So there is this realization when at a young age that this is a beautiful thing, and you start wanting to go through it, maybe at the age of 13 or maybe 12. But then when it's done, then that reality really hit on you that, oh, this is bad. Or when you start comparing the notes from previous lessons in school, maybe you've had somebody talk about it, or even your teachers telling you that this thing is bad. But when you go back to the village and try to protest, or maybe tell them, oh, I've heard that this is bad, they'll tell you that is a Western culture, we have our own culture. So it's something that is deep-rooted in our communities, that you grow up knowing it, but you really don't know the real effect of it. So it will just hit on you that this is being done, your rights are being violated in a very technical way that you will not understand as a child. So as I reflect on the social norms of my community and where I'm from, our social norms are very beautiful. just the way Zara said earlier, that, you know, rather than crushing your traditions completely, just pick that one aspect that is affecting the young girls. You know, just pick that bad tradition and run with it. Just tell them that our traditions are very beautiful. Our beading, you know, our beautiful girls should stay the same the way they are. Our, you know, singing and celebrations are very beautiful, but can we just say no to FGM and celebrate that young girl and the beauty of a woman in a very special way without the cut? So if we reflect our social norms in that perspective and just try to say no to FGM in a very polite manner in the community, use our own stories to just let them reflect that this is bad, involve men, and just let them also support the voices of women in the community, then we will be heading at a better place. Yeah.
Thank you, Severina, and thank you, Zara, for sharing. Does anyone else want to reflect on that first question? I think Absa, I see your hand, so feel free.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to share, like I shared in my video, that I was proud that I had been through FGM, because in my community, it was widespread and it was associated with the notion of being clean and pure and beautiful. And I believed it because that's what I was told. And as a young girl, I didn't have any reason to question otherwise. But it was interesting at the same time that as a girl, I had other expectations of me, like doing house chores and cleaning and cooking and doing all of that for the family, but my brothers didn't have to do it. And that a part of me, even though in one aspect, I was proud to have undergone FGM, but there was a part of me that felt something not okay about me being the one who's doing those chores, and my brothers only have to worry about going to school. And even though I have to go to school like them, I had this added responsibility of being responsible for them in the house and for myself and the rest of the family. And I questioned that, and I didn't have any answers to why that is, but there was something unjust about it. I felt, even though at the same time I was okay with FGM and proud that I had been through it. And it was until I got to middle school and I had the opportunity to attend a training that talked to me about gender inequity and equality and discrimination that exists in my community, that it all made sense and how all of these issues intersect. And for the first time, I started reflecting on why some of my friends did not have their rights, to go to school, and why some of them had to be married off early, and why I had to do all the chores and my brothers didn't have to, and why I had to undergo FGM. And it hit me at that moment that it's all the same. All of these issues are connected, and it is a big issue. It limits our potential as girls and women in our communities to develop to our full potentials, to be our whole selves, and to, I don't think that connected to the earlier conversations around involvement of men, I think that when an injustice exists in a community, that we all lose, regardless of our genders. No community benefits when there is a portion of that society that are not allowed to be their whole selves and to develop to their whole selves. And I think that, I share this a lot when I talk to my brothers, and they're like, oh, how do I cook this? And I say, well, like, you got cheated because you were denied of the opportunity to learn a skill that is a valuable skill. I'm glad that I have those skills, but I didn't agree with the conditions and the terms in which I had to learn them. And it's that reality that actually shifted my life and my goal from middle school to get into advocacy and do this work.
Thank you, Absa. I think you make a really good point when we're talking about social norms. And it's really important to recognize that social norms are found in every culture and community in the world. And social norms connected to genders are very common, and the cooking is a perfect example. And I feel like actually I dealt with that growing up too, and not wanting to cook because it was expected of me, and being female and kind of rebelling against that. And now I kind of wish that I had learned things from my mom that I hadn't as a younger, but it impacted me. So just to kind of bring it up that sometimes when you're not familiar with FGMC, it can seem very hard to understand how it can continue. But again, recognizing that it has been justified in all these different ways, and people are conditioned to think it's acceptable. And I think your video showed a really good example of how you thought it was okay to do. It's important to recognize that that's part of why FGMC continues generation after generation, but we need to change those social norms, and we need to start really suggesting that, no, this is something that shouldn't be acceptable, to help shift mentality. Sabrina, I see you wanted to add something.
Yes, I just wanted to give another example to add what Absa said. In our communities, the way FGM is being quote unquote taught, or when the way a young girl is being prepared for FGM is totally different the way a young man is being prepared for male circumcision. So because young men are given that opportunity, around 3 months or 4 months of preparation, they're being prepared psychologically, they're being taught who they are and their place in the community, being lifted up and being told that they are the warriors and all that. But on the other hand, the girls are just not told anything. You just told the same day when you wake up in the morning and get the card. So it's kind of very ironical, because then on the other hand, this young girl will be affected. The FGM is so cruel that it brings these effects on a young girl's body, and she's never been prepared to do that. So the social norms in our communities differ, especially when it comes to male and female. And these are some of the things we need really to advocate for change. We really need to, educate our communities to give, equal opportunities to women and young girls, so that they can be able to advocate for themselves and say no to FGM. And for the beautiful traditional practices, they need to be taught equally as boys. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to reflect on that question? Okay, I'm going to go to the next question. And the second question was, besides witnessing and supporting and trying to educate others, how can U.S. women, and I want to say it's not just U.S. women, but globally, how can women be an ally in this effort? Would anyone like to take that question on? Hunter, go for it.
Sure. I think one thing you could do is reach out to an organization such as Sahiyo and ask to become a volunteer. That doesn't have to be a huge time commitment if you're a busy person, but that's one really good option. Another is, if you're in the US, you could look up the laws about FGMC in your state, or if you live somewhere else in your country or region, and look at those laws and see, is there one? If there is one, is it comprehensive? Is there provision to provide support for survivors or provision for education? And if not, reach out to your legislators and let them know that you do want to see this change and have that policy be created. And I think one more thing is thinking about what unique skills you have to be able to contribute. So if you're an artist or a writer, you have a talent that you can use towards awareness for FGC. Or if you're a healthcare provider, educating yourself and training yourself in how to best support survivors who come into to come to you for your services is extremely helpful. And more things like that, just thinking about how your unique talents and skills can be brought to the movement.
Thank you, Hunter. I feel like that was really well said and definitely great ideas. And one thing just to point out in terms of legislation, I'm glad you brought it up. If you are in the US, there are 39 states that have a law, but Hunter, you said something about comprehensive law. And I think it's important to recognize that not all state laws are comprehensive. And so there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of ensuring that every state has a comprehensive law that includes provision around communication outreach. So that is definitely something I think everyone can reach out to your legislator if this is something that you feel very passionate about and you would like to learn more about it, what's being done at the policy level in your state. But does anybody else want to respond to this question? Arifa. Oh, and Arifa and then Maria.
No, it's a really great question and applies to people everywhere. I think even from the Indian perspective, we get this a lot from students when we talk and talk about FGC in colleges. A lot of people want to do something, but they're not really sure how. Especially when in a country like India, the communities that practice FGC are a really, really tiny minority. So most people don't even know somebody who belongs to that community. So they may not be able, and they may not have time to properly volunteer for an organization that is working. And I mean, my words of advice are always that everyone can do something, whether it is if you can't volunteer, the bare minimum that one can do is to pay attention to stories, to not dismiss somebody's stories, to not, if you don't belong to a community that practices FGC, you can be empathetic towards somebody who's sharing a story rather than trying to I understand that there's a lot of shock when somebody who's never heard of FGC hears about it for the first time. And so there's a tendency to be like, oh my God, this is what your community does. And then it goes into this space of othering, of trying to point fingers and trying to make a person feel like they come from a barbaric community or a community that's that needs to be shamed for what they're doing. So I think in that moment, it's important to reflect that, to understand what social norms are, and to understand that just as shocking as this practice is, as it is, yes, it's a direct assault on the body, but it is also a social norm like many other gendered discriminatory social norms in all our communities. So if you cannot do something directly about FGC, you would be contributing by doing something about the social norm that's harming women in your community, whether it's menstrual taboos or something else, because they're all tied together. And what we need is a culture of, collectively opposing patriarchal practices that are harmful. And definitely, not being conscious about not taking an Islamophobic perspective on things, or just a racist perspective on things. If you can develop that sensitivity, it then would help not just the issue of FGC, but so many other things at the same time.
Thanks, Arifa. Definitely agree with you. Mariam, I know you wanted to chime in as well.
Yep. Yeah. And actually piggybacking off of everything Arifa just said, I think it's important to, this perceptions around this practice around FGM, it's racialized, right? Like I remember when I first started doing advocacy work, and I'm speaking right now in my personal capacity, but when I was at State Department, we were engaging on this issue back in 2015, amplifying voices of survivors. And when you would talk to people in the community, there would be a sense of, oh, well, what we do is different, right? Like the Bora community, the South Asian community is different. What's done in Africa, now that's barbarism. That's what FGM is. What we do is something totally different. So I think the semantics really matter. Adjudicating what kind of cutting is the most harmful. When I talk about this now, I say, when like an Economist reporter asked me, how are you cut, right? Like our first question. And it was meant to be to say that, I think she was an ally in the sense she was trying to say all forms are harmful. But I said, you would never ask a rape survivor, how are you raped? I'd like to know exactly, sort of how, the mechanics of this, right? It would be absurd. And the imagery, for example, that we see, I'm constantly, and people are well-meaning, but you always see these very disempowered images. Sometimes you'll see even survivors, in Getty Images pool, you'll see the reenactment happening. You would never see a reenactment of a rape survivor being raped. We know it's bad. We don't need to show the visuals and the sort of, because in a sense, like when you do that, it's dehumanizing, right? It's yet again, because it's seen as something happening predominantly to Black and brown women and Black and brown bodies, it's dehumanizing because it's seen as, oh, we can show that graphic detail. And the flip side of that is there are white survivors of FGM, right, that have courageously shared their stories, and they're not believed. They're told, oh no, that only happens in Africa, or immigrants from certain countries in the United States, for example, when we know that FGM, the history of FGM in this country goes back to the 19th century as a cure for hysteria. So this is not necessarily an import, it's indigenous and it's global in scope, right? And so when we're framing this, it has to be seen, as Arifa mentioned, it can't just be seen as one particular community and racialized or associated with one religion. It's like any form of gender-based violence. It's a form of structural violence. It's about power. It's about control. So I think it's important when we talk about FGM to look at the root causes around power control, and also just to flip the script entirely, rather than saying, okay, what kind of cutting is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's to say, doesn't even matter. We should be focusing on everybody. And to answer the original question, it should be about everyone. This is everyone's issue, right? A world where everyone is free to be safe, free to be whole, free to live carefree childhoods. That's I think when you flip the script around the world you want versus what you don't want, it's more inviting. I like sort of talking about, I want a world where everyone's free to be safe, rather than I'm talking about adjudicating this kind of mutilation or cutting or whatever phrase you're going to use. It's kind of gross, honestly, to be like the poster child of genital cutting or mutilation. It sucks. I mean, I don't like being, I have to do this work. I think many of us on this stage do this because we're compelled, right? I kind of want to take away the shackles and be done with it and work on, I'm an artist. You can see my paintings. I like doing other stuff. We all have hobbies. Mari is a, sculptor. Like we all have these other lives. So I think it's important to then, everyone should be involved. This shouldn't fall on the burden of only survivors retelling, re-traumatizing themselves over and over in platforms like these to share the grief and the gore and the pain. It needs to be about, let's flip the script and focus on the concept of holistic sense, physical and emotional, because both of that, we're human, right? We're multiple components, not just the physical, what part of your body was cut. It's also your whole self. And so I think it's important that everyone get involved, and that everyone, as Hunter mentioned, there are many ways to get involved. So this is an open invitation.
Definitely agree with you, Mariam. And I just wanted to reiterate 2 points that you spoke about, is that this is an issue that impacts all communities. I think it's really important to mention that. And I think Zara also talked about this. It's something that a report came out saying that this is occurring at least in 92 countries globally. And you didn't see stories from all the different backgrounds of individuals that have been part of the Voices Project, but I can tell you, we do have stories from women of all different backgrounds, including communities Mariam mentioned. So it's just important to recognize that. And then the other part I wanted to also say is that in our next batch, particularly, we've got a few stories of women who have, we think it's really important to also talk about positive deviance. So, talk about the stories of women who have broken that tradition, because change is occurring and we are seeing it occurring. And I think sometimes we forget to share those stories. And so that's something that's really important to Sahiyo. And we'll have a few stories in our next Voices batch that's released that we're excited to show that this is occurring, change is occurring. Girls are being not cut, they're growing up whole, and that's really important to highlight. So we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to say, if there's one other person who would like to comment on this really quickly from the speakers, please feel free to. Anybody? Bay, are you raising your hand? Okay. Oh, we can't hear you though.
No, I think I was just waving my arms around. Oh yeah, sorry, Sanjay, go ahead.
Baya, okay, I'm now able to speak. So I want to say thank you, because only asking how you can help is already help for someone like me, because being able to receive support from people that are not caught, or American people, was one of the key for me to help me to start speaking out and feel confident. Now, to give you like one clue or a simple way, because it's a direct action, you can just choose a country. I can give an example like Chad, one of the poorest countries in the world. Then you go and look at a child that has been cut and you don't know how to reach to act directly. Then you can like identify a child that is in a poorest country, can be Chad or another country in Africa or even here in the United States. Give 3 support that is simple. First, moral support. Imagine if you choose a child in Chad and then call the child to say, I support you. I just tell hello to that child will be a very good support for a survivor. Because I like to put an accent on how to start the process of healing and support to young children early to help them to heal. Then the second support will be financial, because it's one of the poorest countries. So you can give them food, you can provide education, or to support them in the health issue linked to FGM directly. The second point can be just teaching to that child how to say good morning in English, or learn from that child how to say lale in that language that is hello, or thank you, krata. That will be a direct support. And like I like to say, 1 to 10. Do for 1 child, then 2 and 10, and you will help here in United States, in India, in Egypt, or all over the world. And that will be a direct action that will help to solve that issue of how to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being part of our event again and for sharing your thoughts and reflection as well. Really feel honored to know you all and to work with you on the Voices Project. I do want to invite, if Amy would like to say anything as we end this event before we transition to Kate, please feel free to.
I want to say just one thing. I think with the question on allyship is educate yourself, and educate yourself and be a listener, create space for individuals who are survivors and who want to share their stories, and be part of the work, take action.
Thanks, Absa.
Okay.
Amy?
I would also like.
Oh, sorry, I think we're running out of time. Is it really quick? There.
Okay, just on the issue of mental health, it's very important that survivors of FGM are given support, because of their mental health. Because when they are mentally healthy, then at least they can be able to continue with their work. And I saw somebody talking about it, and Amy was also talking about that if they had like enough funds for that, that would be fine. So I would wish if Sahiyo and Storytelling Center can be able to maybe write grants specifically for psychological support and social support, psychological support and mental health issues of the survivors, then that would be fine. Because I just give an example. I was traumatized before, and then after the video, sometimes, just to tell you the truth, sometimes I watch my video and I get goosebumps. Like it's kind of, I feel something within me, which means probably I need to let out more. And I would like that space. And where can I get that space? So those are some of the questions we need to.
No, I agree completely. And it's something that I know Amy and me are working on in terms of really building that up for the workshops themselves and doing that. But I think that longer term care is really important. And there is a need for longer term support for mental health for those affected. So thank you, Severina. Amy, I'd like to let you say any last words, and then we'll turn it over to Kate.
No, thank you. I'm good. I just shared in the chat box. I'm just so happy to see everyone and to continue doing this work. It's really one of my favorite projects that I've been privileged to work on, and I hope we can do a lot more. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Kate?
Yeah, sure. I'll just go ahead and share my screen one last time. And before we ended our session today, we just kind of wanted to leave our audience with some resources to get involved and to learn more about Sahiyo and Storycenter if you're interested. So on this slide, you can find the websites for Sahiyo and Storycenter, as well as the link to more of the videos from the Voices to End FGMC project. You can also follow us on social media at Sahiyo Voices or at Storycenter for updates. And also you can find on our YouTube using this bit.ly link or just Googling in YouTube, again, more of the voices videos if you're interested in like what some of our panelists were mentioning, educating yourself, learning more about what you can do. And finally, just a big thank you to all of our participants who spoke today, as well as all of our guests. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, reach out to Maria or Amy with the 2 emails or on our social media and website.
Great, thank you everybody. And thank you, Kate, for helping to organize this. And thank you to all the speakers again for being part of our event. And thank you to the attendees for coming. We hope that this session was very informative for you all. So enjoy the rest of CSW too.
Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.